Welcome everyone to Talks at Google. I'm your super excited host, Caroline Rainsford, one of the directors here in Google Asia Pacific. And it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by our incredible guest today. Some of you may know Adam as the winner of MasterChef Australia Season 2. Some of you may be one of his 454,000 followers on YouTube. And if you're like me, you may be completely obsessed with his Japanese fried chicken recipe. But Adam is an incredibly talented chef and writer. He's a goodwill ambassador for Japanese cuisine, the author of 5 incredible cookbooks, and the television host to numerous cooking shows, a new one which we're going to hear about later on today. So Adam Liaw, welcome to Talks at Google.
Hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen.
Thanks, Adam.
You're making me feel bad, Caroline, because I haven't uploaded a video to YouTube in a while, and now you're making me feel like I should have.
Well, there's got to be a bit of a plug, but no, everyone's going to be jumping on and looking at all your YouTube videos now. But Adam, we've got some questions for you today, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. So guys, get them ready, and then we're going to turn over to your cooking demo. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Okay. So Adam, we're going to put you through your paces a little bit. We're going to start with some quick fire questions. So word association. So I just want you to come back with the one word that you think of when I say these following things. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So the first one, nice and easy. What's your favorite ingredient?
Oh God. Soy sauce.
Okay. I thought that might be good, simple, basic. Okay, what about you?
I don't have a favorite ingredient. If I can expand on that, I don't really have a favorite ingredient because it's so variable what you can do with everything. And, you know, like fashions and personal preferences, I go through a lot of different phases. You know, at the moment, I'm absolutely loving decapon, the giant mandarins. I don't really cook with them, just eat one every day. But when they go out of season, something else will come along. So it's hard to like have a favorite ingredient. Sorry, I've already expanded. You're trying to do like quick fire questions, but I'm talking for 5 minutes every time you ask me something.
What soy sauce do you use? Everyone will be writing this down.
Again, it's not really an easy answer. So I kind of make my own. I don't brew it from soybeans that often, but I take a naturally brewed soy sauce. I think that's the most important. You just get a naturally brewed soy sauce so you know that it's actually properly made. And then I will infuse that with other things. You know, I'll boil it with Okinawan sugar and shiitake mushrooms or kombu, that kind of thing. Not boil it, but, you know, just infuse it over heat.
Okay, wow. Okay, so adding on from that, what's your favorite dish then?
Hainanese chicken rice. That one's an easy one.
Yum. You're getting some audience participation in this, actually. Is that on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it is. It's actually one of my most popular videos on there. It's I don't know how many views it's got at the moment, but yeah, definitely. You know, there's something about Hainanese chicken rice that is so complete. You know, you're using one chicken and some rice, and you're using the stock that you make from the chicken to flavor the rice and the fat of the chicken in there. You know, it's kind of, it's a really, I don't want to say simple, but it's not complicated. But again, it's kind of not simple to make a good one. But yeah, it's a very complete dish, which I like.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Okay. This is your third one. What do you think of when I say MasterChef?
Boy, that was a long time ago. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know? MasterChef was great fun. I really enjoyed that process. Yeah, I made some great friends, had some great experiences.
Great. It was over 10 years ago, so it was a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Making me feel old.
Okay, your last one before we get into some other questions, Adam. Diversity.
Important.
Nice.
Yeah, I think diversity is phenomenally important, but often not for the reasons that people think it's important. Diversity is, to me, an incredible opportunity for people, for organizations, for governments, for anything really. You know, we talk a lot about how important something like innovation is, and how much that drives development and change and improvement, I guess you could say. But diversity is another form of innovation.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I want to talk to you more a little bit about that a little bit more later, but I'm really interested to hear more about your journey to where you are now, Adam. It's an incredible story, but starting right back at the beginning, where do you think your passion for food or cooking came from?
I always say that people who like to cook start off liking to eat, and I certainly do. It's everyone's eating before they're cooking, everybody, and so unless you're kind of brought up with that understanding that food is something that is not just delicious but meaningful, I guess, that when you're a child you look forward to eating certain things, you look forward to spending time with your family doing things, maybe you look forward to cooking in the kitchen with someone in your family. So that's, I think, I'm hesitant to call it a passion because it kind of makes it sound like it's something that is, I don't know, almost not important or impractical. But I see cooking as being incredibly practical, and that's the kind of the beautiful thing about it. If it was just like, doing something for fun or doing something because I'm passionate about it, then it's kind of less important than if it is practical.
Yeah. Very nice. I've read quite a bit about the influences from your family.
Yeah. So, I mean, my grandma probably did most of the cooking when we were growing. We were one of those 3 generational families that lived together. So my grandmother, who was my only living grandparent for that period of time, lived with us, and while my parents are both working, so her looking after us and cooking for us mainly was probably a really big influence on cooking, because that's, she was incredibly good at it.
Yeah, we should be very proud of you. Adam, during COVID at Google, we've seen an incredible amount of people searching for cooking inspiration. But during COVID, did your cooking style change, or what influence do you think COVID had on your cooking?
Yeah, it did a bit. Not a bit, a lot, I probably should say. It kind of goes back to, that when you were talking about passion for food, my cooking became so much more practical. I was doing things like curing my own Yunnan style ham and pancetta and that kind of thing. And it's not the first time I've done something like that, but maybe a few years ago I'd do something like that as a hobby, something that was interesting to do. But when COVID kind of kicked off, I was doing it more as, necessity. I didn't know how often we'd be going shopping, so I'd cure some meat that I could use over the course of however long we were locked down for. Thankfully, it wasn't huge amounts of time.
Yeah.
So cooking was just, it became like, we can't pop to the shops whenever we want to. We can't do whatever we want and just get food from wherever we want. So we were looking at ways, it was kind of like cooking the way your grandma did, because you were trying to make use of everything. You were, pulling stuff out of your own garden. Nothing like, there was almost nothing in our bin every week, because everything was being used. Cardboard boxes that stuff came in were being chopped up and used as toys for the kids. Building stuff out of cardboard with them. So it was a really, obviously scary for many of us, my family included, but it was also an interesting time to look back at skills that maybe we had lost over the course of the modern world.
Yeah, completely. That really resonates. I think a lot of people have got back into traditional ways of preparing food and thinking about how they do that. So it's great to see. Adam, you obviously have several different styles of cooking that you like, but how has your cooking evolved or changed over time?
Huge amounts. I started cooking probably when I was 8 or 9. and that was cooking family dinner. You know, my family, we had 7 kids living together at that point. And both parents were working. So the kids ranging in age from, I think, 15, 16 down to, you know, newborn, we'd all take turns cooking dinner once, was it once a month? Yeah, so 7 kids once a month. It was 1 week per month was kind of taken care of, and the parents didn't have to worry about what to cook. And so, you know, obviously the really, really young ones were being helped by the older ones, and, you know, I was right in the middle. So my job was a little bit ambiguous. You know, I didn't have a lot of help from the older ones, but then I also wasn't expected to do so much. So it was really simple kind of family dishes at the beginning, and then when it became more of a hobby, stuff became more complicated. And then, you know, I moved out of home when I was 14. So then it became, again, kind of more about necessity again, lots of 2-minute noodles, that kind of thing. And then it became more of a hobby again in my later teens and in my 20s. And then when I moved to, you know, having a lot of dinner parties around that time. When I moved to Japan when I was 23, it changed completely again. You know, learning a new style of cooking, more driven by kind of access to new styles of ingredients, or, you know, lack of access to other ingredients. But a supermarket in Japan is very different to a supermarket in Australia. And then I think, you know, getting married and having kids changes the way you cook again, because it again becomes so much more practical and functional. And that's, I love that aspect of it. And in many respects, the way I cook now is more similar to when I was sort of 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Adam, I want to change tack now a little bit and talk to you a little bit about racial equity. So, as you know, this event today has been brought to the Google Asia Pacific region by one of our diversity group, the Asian Google Network, which is actually our second largest employee group globally. You've had so much experience both in the corporate and food worlds, but also across, as you've mentioned, geographies like Japan and Australia. In your opinion, what diversity and inclusion efforts have you seen work? And then, contrary to that, where have you seen it just not working?
For most of my corporate career, I have to say that diversity was not a big priority. You know, I finished working in big corporations in 2010. And certainly, you know, when I was working in law firms, there was a little bit of looking at diversity, you know, hiring panels being more diverse. We didn't go to the lengths of, you know, taking names and schools off resumes or anything like that. When I was working for Disney in Japan, it was actually much more of a priority. You know, it was a less diverse society generally, but diversity was looked at as being a really important and valuable thing. You know, when I started there, it was almost a prerequisite. I don't think it was a specific prerequisite to be proficient in English to work at Disney, because it was an American company. And there was a real, I guess, paradigm shift when I was working there that was, I think, incredibly successful, where the organization stopped looking at itself as being an American company in Japan, but being a Japanese company administering American brands. And I think that was phenomenally successful. You know, you started to look at talent very, very differently and appreciating them very differently. And, you know, the fact that you didn't speak English was not a big deal. It was, you know, it seemed so ridiculous back then, but I was probably one of maybe 4 people in the entire organization of thousands that wasn't fluent in Japanese, or at least proficient in Japanese. And so I'd been hired not speaking a word of Japanese at all. And then I had to learn Japanese very, very quickly. You know, started doing a few lessons. But I mean, by that point, I'd been in Japan already 3 years. So I was starting to pick it up. But over the next 4 years, I really had to put my foot down and try and learn as much
Good
Japanese
on
as
you.
possible.
It's amazing.
This strange thing, walking into a meeting one day and the meeting's conducted in English, and then you walk in the next day and all the meetings are in Japanese.
Okay, well, there you go. That's good motivation.
Yeah.
To learn. Bringing it back to more recently, Adam, you were one of 16 extraordinary or prominent Australians to write an open letter around national unity, or the racism that many people were experiencing in Australia at the beginning of COVID. Can you talk to the audience today a little bit about what motivated you to write that and the impact that you think that COVID's had on diverse populations around the world?
Yeah, I think leadership is a really important aspect of addressing racism. To me, racism is an important thing to tackle structurally. I'm not so concerned with people yelling at people on buses. Not that I'm not concerned about it, but I don't think that you need to address every single racist person to address racism. Racism is a much, much bigger problem than an idiot on a bus, or somebody calling people names. But to address, racist ideas come from unaddressed racism, I think. This idea that people can be put into certain pigeonholes because of the color of their skin, their ethnic background, their gender, that kind of thing, is an issue that is really only addressed by people taking leadership. And so, it is never a desire to want to write an open letter to address racism or inequality in some way. It's something you just kind of have to do. If you're let me go back one step. We often look at change as being a very gradual process, but changing opinions is not. Changing opinion happens extremely quickly. So you look at something like 9/11, anti-Muslim sentiment in the US changed kind of overnight. And with COVID, it was kind of a similar thing in a lot of Western countries, where you saw, not a huge amount of anti-Asian sentiment before that, but then because of some of the political messaging, I think, around the origins of COVID, it just appeared. It sparked, and I was really kind of in two minds about whether we need to address it head on. But then, after sleeping on it for a night, I thought it was really the best thing to do. And the result of that letter was incredibly popular, not popular, positive. We had support from both sides of the Australian government. I think it was tabled in both the House of Reps and the Senate by members of both major parties. And it got, I guess, not media coverage, but it allowed both people in positions of leadership in the Asian Australian community, but also outside of that community as well, to show that it wasn't an acceptable thing, wasn't a part of what we are as Australians to engage in that kind of behaviour. And so I was very happy to be involved with it, and I think it had a very positive result.
Yeah, no, well, I think Adam, amazing leadership, and it did at least open the door for those conversations to take place. So, well done, and thank you. I know a lot of the audience today will be very grateful that there's people like you that took the stance you did. So it's great. Adam, one last question before we get into your cooking. You often, particularly in a lot of your books, but also in your videos as well, you talk a lot about, in your shows, you talk a lot about the importance of simplicity in the kitchen. So
Yes.
We've got a lot of Googlers today that are very keen to hear all your tips and tricks. But what would be your advice to every Googler out there that needs to bring some more simplicity into their dinners at home?
Get the basics right. I'll show you a dish in a minute that is incredibly, incredibly simple. You know, we're using 4 or 5 ingredients. I think sometimes it's a natural way of thinking when you're not understanding something very well. You often think it's more complicated than it is. You know, learning languages is one way of looking at it. You know all the words in every language, essentially, for the most part. You know, you don't know how to pronounce them, you don't know other, but there's a finite things that you're trying to describe and do. You know, this is a cup in English, or a glass. It's a different thing in different languages, but we're all describing the same thing. So the things that you're doing are not particularly complicated. You just think that they're more complicated because you don't know the exact way to do it. So most of the things that we do are very simple. And so trying to overcomplicate them makes them more difficult. I'll explain it in better detail when we're actually cooking, because it makes more sense when you're actually doing something. Just on simplicity.
Do you want to introduce the dish then, Adam? Start to talk about why you to this one.
We're going to make beef tataki, which is, it's kind of almost considered a raw dish in Japanese cuisine. Within Japanese food, you kind of have 5 different cooking styles. You have raw food, simmered foods, steamed food, fried food, and grilled food. So agemono, yakimono, mushimono, nimono, which is simmered foods, or raw food. And tataki is essentially a beef fillet that is seared, marinated very simply, and then sliced and served. It's one ingredient with a couple of seasonings, and that's all you really have to do with it. So it's very, very simple.
This sounds like us, Adam. So look, we're looking forward to you getting into it. So why don't you start? And while you're preparing the food, I'll continue to ask you any questions that the audience might have. Thank you.
Sure. So what we're going to start with is a beef fillet. I've got a whole, not entirely the whole thing. You've got the end of it that I've taken off, but I'm just going to trim this. If I can get my knife out of there. So this whole beef fillet, it's got a couple of different lobes on it, some silvering on one side. Just want to separate the lobes, because in Japanese cooking, Japanese kitchens, I should say, you don't often have an oven. Well, these days you probably do, but in the old days, not so much. So a lot of food is cooked without an oven. So like a big chunk of meat like that is quite difficult to cook unless you've got a way of surrounding it in heat. So we trim it into smaller pieces, season it really well, salt, pepper. You can leave the pepper out if you want. It's not overly important. I just quite like it. And then we're going to sear that in a hot pan. So I've got a carbon steel frying pan here, pretty simple. Just going to get that hot before I start. This is part of the problem with cooking shows, is that they often jump over the most important parts of the craft of cooking to get to the recipe. So this is a very simple recipe. The ingredients are only beef. We've got some mirin, sake, soy sauce, garlic and ginger. But I guess the thing that you need to understand to make it taste good is the basics of what you're doing with this very simple, I guess, approach. So beef, seasoned, salt and pepper. Got a bit of oil that I'll put into the pan once it's hot. And then we're going to add in these ingredients: soy sauce, mirin, sake. I might put a dash of sugar in there as well, because when I was talking about simplicity, one thing that we kind of often don't understand is that we only taste 5 things relevant to cooking. We actually do taste a few more, but of all the different ingredients that we have, the taste of them is 5 things: salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami or savory. That's what we taste with our tongue. You know, there are a couple of others: astringency, tannins, that kind of thing, metallicness, not hugely relevant to cooking. All of the other flavors that we talk about, you know, the tastes versus, I guess, aromas or flavors, they are aromas, we smell them. But that's not what makes something taste good or bad. An aroma will make something taste distinctive. So it might make, let's get this into the pan first. I'll come back to that point. So pan hot.
Yeah.
And then oil into it. No, don't heat the oil into the pan, sorry. Because heating oil in a pan means that the pan doesn't get hot enough because the oil will start to smoke before the pan gets to the point that you want it to be. So then you put the beef into the pan and don't touch it. Like, the reason that we're frying it is to get a nice brown crust, I guess, on the outside of it. So moving it around the pan isn't really all that important for achieving that. In fact, it will be detrimental to achieving that because you're just moving around too much. So just leave it in the pan. We'll start to brown it more equally later, but let me get back to the point I was talking about. So those tastes versus the aromas that we're talking about. Say you've got some coriander. If you pinch your nose and you eat coriander, it will taste slightly bitter. Not much taste to it at all. Let go of your nose, and then all of a sudden you get coriander flavor. That's good if you want something to taste like coriander. It's not very good if you want to make something taste good or bad. So that's why when we talk about seasonings, and this is really kind of the key to Japanese cooking, we're adding soy sauce to this, not to give it a soybean flavor. We're going to give it a salty and savory taste from adding soy sauce. The reason we add wine, or cooking wine, rice wine in this stage, sake, is to add savoriness to it, because that umami savory taste comes from the process of fermentation. So soy sauce is fermented, the wine is fermented, then we add mirin, which is sweetness. And so you understand kind of the basis of the taste of this dish. It's meat, which has a savory taste. So now you can see how that's starting to get brown there. And it's only able to get brown because I'm not mucking around with it too much. And I'm just trying to sear the outside. You know, I might actually add a touch of sugar into this too. Not necessary, but I do like it. It's just a touch of sugar there to help. If there are any questions.
Yeah, there are some really good questions here. So we've got one from Suji. Adam, what role does authenticity play in ethnic cuisine?
It only plays a role if you consider a cuisine to be ethnic. You know, I love a video that BuzzFeed did years ago, actually, about people, Asian Americans, talking about Panda Express. And generationally, it was chalk and cheese. You know, the older generation would eat Panda Express and go, not bad, that's pretty good. The younger generation was like, this is not real Chinese food. Like, there's so much identity caught up in the idea of authenticity. But if you're actually in China, or you're in Japan, or you're in a country where, you know, I'm a first generation migrant to Australia, I don't much mind the authenticity. You know, I make Hainanese chicken rice based on the way my grandmother taught me to make it, but I don't make it exactly the same way. You know, there are ingredients that I've learnt about and I've developed, and, you know, I don't mind that I cook it differently. If you're trying to Authenticity is in some ways a bit of a time capsule, because you're going back to a point and you're saying, at this point in time, this dish was authentic. And then everything after it, or maybe before it, was not, which is, obviously not true. But having the confidence to be able to adapt something, to be able to, not be trapped in authenticity, trapped in trying to cook something that is the way it was done 15, 20, 50, 100 years ago. I'm not a huge... I think authenticity is valuable for teaching you how something was, learning how something was, but it's not valuable or relevant for adapting or evolving.
Yeah.
For fairly obvious reasons.
Adam, Kenneth's asked a question about, do you often make any fusion dishes that combine what you learned in Japan with Malaysian cooking?
Yes and no. Fusion is, every dish is a fusion dish. So I've just taken that sauce and added that into my pan. Turn the heat down a little bit because it's getting a bit crazy over there. And then because of the sugar and the mirin and the process of reduction, I'm just going to let that thicken a little bit so that it coats the outside of the beef. So what was the question again?
Fusion between Japanese and Malaysian food, yeah.
Yeah. So, even when I make something like Hainanese chicken rice, I'll start off the stock, traditionally, authentically, you might say. It's ridiculous to say. Hainanese chicken rice is a dish that's less than 80 years old, maybe around 80 years old. My family is originally from Hainan. People in Hainan would look at Hainanese chicken rice and go, that's ridiculous, because it's based on wenchangji, which is actually a type of chicken, not a breed, but like a geographic indicator of chicken from Wenchang village in Hainan, which is kind of near where my family's from. But I'll make Hainanese chicken rice and I'll start with kombu in the stock just to give it additional savoriness and maybe add some bonito flakes. So, I guess you'd call it a fusion dish, but I don't really look at it that way. So now, I don't need to show you. I can just show you on the stove. So I'm just rolling this through that, I guess, glaze in some way. This is kind of like teriyaki. It's not technically teriyaki, but it's kind of like it. After that's done, it should be kind of, like I remember I said it was a rare or raw classified style of dish. You could throw that in the oven if you want it to be sort of rare, medium rare. I think it's better kind of as it is, raw-ish in the middle. And then this coating on the outside gives it additional savoriness. So throw it into a reusable plastic bag, something like that. Refrigerate it for 45 minutes minimum, maybe up to a couple of hours or something, or overnight even. And then we can probably start to slice it. How are we going for time? Not so bad.
Adam, what I've got a question for you actually. What knives are you using? Because this is going to take a good sharp knife.
It does. So I'm using Japanese knives for this. Japanese knives kind of come in a basic set of 3. This is a deba, or a boning knife. It's a bit thicker and is used for cutting through fish bones, deboning chickens, that kind of thing, which is why I use that for, I guess, breaking down the beef fillet a little bit. This is usuba or nakiri, which is a vegetable cutting knife, which is a flat one, flat on the end there. That's how you identify it. Usuba nakiri just means it's whether it's sharpened on one side or both, generally.
Wow.
And then this is a yanagiba, which is a long knife. You've probably seen them used for cutting sashimi. I'll use that to cut the beef. But then you can have these other kind of variations on Japanese knives as well. This is a gyuto, which technically means beef knife. Back in the old days in Japan, you weren't allowed to eat beef. So when Japan started to open up, these Western style knives post Meiji Restoration started to become a little bit more popular, multi-purpose knives rather than individual purpose knives. And so you had this increase in things like santoku, which is a 3 benefits knife, or a gyuto, technically a beef knife, but a standard Western chef's knife.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I'll get a plate and put that on.
Adam, there's a really interesting question here about some of the ingredients you just used from Tim. So the mirin or the sake are quite similar. Mirin gives gloss, but why sake at all? Why did you use that as well?
So it's essentially sake is really for 2 things. If you recall when I was talking about the difference between tastes and flavors, tastes are those like salty, sweet, sour, bitter, umami. Sake will give you umami, like because it's fermented, it gives you that savory taste. Cooking sake sometimes adds a bit of salt as well, just to increase that connection between the savoriness and saltiness. But one thing that is really interesting is when you look at the things that give you taste: saltiness, sweetness, sourness, bitterness, and umaminess. They're all water soluble. So salt you can dissolve in water, sugar you can dissolve in water, acid you can dissolve in water. Acid that gives us our sourness, bitterness, again dissolves in water. Things like glucosinolates from vegetables are water soluble. When we in Western countries, we tend to salt vegetables to draw out the bitterness. In Japanese cuisine, you put it in water because the water will leach out that bitterness from the vegetables. They're all water soluble. And then all of those flavor compounds, the essential oils and things that you give, they're not. And so one thing that allows you to marry the water soluble flavor compounds, taste compounds, with the non-water soluble flavor compounds is alcohol, which is why you tend to see alcohol used in pretty much every cuisine. It's fermented, so it gives you that savoriness, but then it's also allows you to combine taste and flavor together in a dish.
Okay. Hey, Adam, we've got quite a few vegetarians on the stream today. What would be your thoughts? Exactly. What would be your thoughts if you wanted to do a vegetarian substitute for this?
I wouldn't use, tataki as a way of doing that, but teriyaki, very, very similar, as you can see in the ingredients that we're using. The soy sauce, sake, mirin, etc. That can be applied to just about anything. Vegetables, mushrooms, tofu, raw vegetables, even with ponzu. Again, ponzu is a very similar thing. It's made from soy sauce, sake, mirin, a bit of sugar, and then you add acidity to it. From those 5 tastes that we're talking about, the one that's missing is acidity. So to make ponzu, you add acidity to that. So it's a very, very kind of simple way of understanding taste. It's something that Japanese cuisine and Chinese cuisine actually do extremely well.
Yeah, maybe.
You can cut this super fine, but
it's so tender.
It is very tender because it's still very, very rare inside. Actually, Phil, can you give us a close-up on this maybe? Yeah, so you can see how it is. You call that rare. I would say raw. But if you wanted to chill this further, I just did this, 10 minutes before you guys came onto the stream. So if you wanted to infuse it with more flavor, cut it more fine, you would chill it more. So this has just been in the fridge, but if you brought it down to almost kind of near to freezing, it's much easier to cut into very, very thin portions.
Okay. Yeah, because you sometimes see it and it's sliced so thinly, isn't it? It's almost paper thin.
Yeah, and that's good. I actually prefer to cut it a bit more thickly like this.
It looks good. I bet everyone on the stream is getting very hungry right now. And there's been a few call outs of your teriyaki sauce, which I can also attest to being amazing. Is that something you use a lot?
It is, just because it is such a simple way to add the seasoning that I'm talking about. You know, what teriyaki sauce includes is saltiness, sweetness, and umaminess. So it gives you this kind of the basis of this taste profile. And then if you want to, you can add a bit of citrus to it for sourness, or, you know, what I'm going to add to this right now actually is some garlic and ginger. So I'm just going to use a Japanese style grater just to finely grate some garlic. And this in Japanese cuisine is what you would call karami, which is, I guess, something piquant or something spicy that you would add onto a sashimi or raw style dish, or any dish really. You know, we would know about wasabi or karashi, Japanese style mustard, often with different styles of sashimi. You, instead of your wasabi, you might get garlic instead. Garlic is quite often served with tataki style dishes. So just a bit of raw garlic there. And then we'll grate some ginger as well. But on top of being just like that slight spiciness of the karami, it also adds a bit of bitterness. You know,
Yeah.
All of our basic ingredients in cooking work to that taste profile. So salt, every kitchen. You know, umami, savoriness, every kitchen, whether it's stock or alcohol or whatever. Every cuisine around the world has a source of umami as well. Sweetness, sugar, palm sugar, cane sugar, whatever it happens to be. Again, every cuisine in the world. Sourness from vinegars or citrus or tamarind or whatever it happens to be is in every cuisine in the world. And then bitterness, which is the one that is not immediately, I guess, considered, but bitter foods are among the most popular. Tea, coffee, beer, pepper. The primary taste profile of pepper is bitter. So it does add a flavor, but it also adds a bitter taste to food. Mustards, garlic, onion, all have elements of bitterness to them. So you see these common ingredients really being, I guess, a function of their taste, not rather than their aroma or flavor.
Okay. Adam, one of the teams asked, I think I know the answer to this, but what do you think is more important, the quality of the ingredients or the technique?
There was anyone ever watched the TV show Iron Chef? Yeah, probably people do. Anyway, there was always a guy on there, one of the judges, and his title was Rosanjin Scholar. And Rosanjin, Kitten Rosanjin, was one of these, I guess, gourmets of Japan, alive through the 19th and 20th century. And you know, he used to hold dinner parties where he would make all the crockery himself and design the menus of that. And he was a master potter and amazing cook. And he used to have this thing where, to test if someone was a good chef, they would have to make a dish for him from, I guess, the bones of some old river fish that he had near where he lived up in the mountains. And if they could make a good dish from these terrible ingredients, then he was considered a good chef. I don't entirely agree with that. good ingredients make cooking very, very simple. You know, if you made a dish like this with bad quality beef, or, you know, I don't want to say bad, but the better the quality of the beef, the tastier this will be in many cases, because you are able to treat it simply. You don't have to do, you know, complicated things to do it. I think technique is fundamental to good cooking. You know, it really is. And if you don't have good technique, no matter how good your ingredient is, you end up ruining it. So it is, technique is probably more important than ingredients, but good ingredients are such a valuable safety net, I guess. You know, if you don't want to have to put huge amounts of effort into something, get a good ingredient. It's always going to taste good, and just don't mess it up. Treat it very simply.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. What are one of the questions, Adam, that has been asked is, what are the absolute staples for all the Google team to go and get in their pantry if they want to cook your
Depends
food?
on what you cook, I guess. You know, if you're cooking a lot of Japanese food, there's probably like 1,000 dishes you can make with soy sauce, sake, mirin, and a bit of sugar. Add some miso to that, and you've got 90% of Japanese cuisine. Once you add, you know, because I think pantry staples are, you've kind of got your seasonings, whatever you use in the cuisines that you cook to season. And, you know, as we've talked about, they are kind of the same thing. You have a source of savoriness, a source of saltiness, a source of sweetness. So if it's muryut in Korean cuisine and soy sauce in Korean cuisine, or, you know, shaoxing wine in Chinese cuisine, you're adding these different ingredients for the same purpose, because you know, there's this myth of individual taste. We all evolved to taste things that taste good. You know, that's part of human biology. We crave these, you know, salty things because it gives us minerals, umami things because it gives us amino acids, proteins. Often fermentation will give us bacteria, so we like fermented foods to populate our gut bacteria. We like things that are sweet because it contains calories and gives us an evolutionary advantage. We like we like to have a taste of sour and bitter, so we know when things are not ripe or poisonous. So the tastes that we have are a product of our evolution, so they're not really kind of individual. So our seasonings, whatever the cuisines you happen to cook most popularly, are really important. And then your staples, you know, things, your flour, rice, eggs, milk, that kind of thing. So it depends on how you cook, what your pantry staples are. But once you've got, I guess, your staples and your seasonings sorted out, your trip to the butcher or the grocery store or whatever, then populate your kitchen with flavors. You know, you've got the tastes and the staples sorted out, you bring the flavors into the kitchen. You know, this dish, the taste of it is a balance of salty, a bit of sweetness, and umami. The flavor of it is beef flavor, garlic and ginger, you know, that's it really. I haven't added anything else to it. You know, if we added some shiso or something, that would be a flavor. But the basic elements of this, you know, we had that salty, sweet, savory, then we added some ponzu to dip it in, which is basically the same thing again, but with some acidity. So the one thing that was lacking was the acidity, so we add that in the ponzu, and then you got the bitterness or the astringency from things like garlic and ginger, the additional aspects of the dish. So it's like, yeah, you see how simple it is once you kind of know how taste works.
That's amazing, Adam. Thank you. Like, the team's going to be able to all go away and do this. So it's just, yeah, you make it look so incredibly easy, but beautiful, simple food with amazing flavor. So thank you. Adam, I'm really keen to spend a couple of minutes on particularly one of your upcoming projects. And there's a few other questions here about, you know, your love Iron Chef. Who was your favorite chef, Adam?
I like Chen Kenichi. Interesting story about he was Iron Chef Chinese. His father, what was his name? Ken Min, maybe. But he was essentially the guy who brought Chinese food to Japan. And so where around the world, outside of China, Chinese food is based on, I guess, the region of Chinese people who went there. So in the US and Australia, a lot of Cantonese came from the south of China to those areas. Through Southeast Asia, a lot more kind of Fujian influence with the Hokkien, Teochew, not Teochew is different, but the regions of China where the people came from have kind of shown how Chinese cuisine developed in those areas. But a lot, because there wasn't big waves of migration from China to Japan, not in the modern era anyway, a lot of Japanese cuisine is based around Sichuan cuisine, which is the cuisine of Chen Kenichi's father. So when you go to Japan and you eat Chinese food, there's a lot of mapo tofu or prawns in chili sauce, or these kind of dishes that are evolved from Sichuanese cuisine more than Cantonese cuisine.
Okay, cool. Amazing. Adam, I want the team to hear about your upcoming project. Can you tell the team about what they can expect to see on SBS soon? Are you allowed to share?
So I'm working on quite a few different shows actually for SBS, but the two that, well, one I haven't even started on yet, two I haven't started on, but one that we've just finished filming is called Road Trip for Good, and it's around the recovery of regional areas in Australia, which are our food producing areas, after, you know, they've been through so much, years of drought and then bushfires that were seen around the world, and then COVID. These areas have had a difficult time. And so we've done a series focusing on food producers in these areas and their experiences through the bushfires particularly, but also COVID after that. So that's coming out towards the end of the year on SBS. The interesting thing about that series is we're actually going to be running that on YouTube too. So half our episodes will go out on broadcast TV, but then also all of our individual stories with all the producers will air on my YouTube channel for a couple of months, over a couple of months after that. And then a similar story will be for a series that I'm doing on Malaysian cuisine, and the relationship between Australia and Malaysia. So, you know, Australia and Malaysia have a very, very long history, you know, going back to, in some ways, even before colonialism. But that relationship has often been really based on food. You know, back when you had traders coming from Southeast Asia to trade for tripangs or sea cucumbers with the Australian Indigenous population, through to I guess so many Australians of Malaysian heritage who are involved with food, you know, myself included with that as well. So that's two series that I've got coming up on SBS over the next few months. And the great thing about them is that they'll air not just in Australia, but also through Asia as well, and then also digitally on YouTube.
Fantastic. Adam, you're a very busy man. We thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. You've got so many fans within Google who are just incredibly excited to see you in action today. So thank you. And thanks for sharing more about your journey. What an incredible transition. And thank you for being away and try and practice tonight, I think. But
I need to upload the video to my YouTube channel. I think you're making me feel very bad, all of you Googlers, for not being more on top of that. So I'll upload one in the next couple of days.
Very good. And team, that's a clear shout out to make sure you're engaging with Adam on YouTube. So we encourage him to do more of it. But thank you so much, and thank you all for joining, guys. So thank you, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.